Lawyers, what is the stupidest case anyone has ever come to you with wanting to sue? I work for a judge, and we get some freaking ridiculous cases. The most ridiculous was this guy who alleged an international US-based plot against rednecks, that was the word he used, in America, and how they had some super secret high-tech army to eliminate rednecks. He was in prison and was requesting a presidential pardon, a boatload of money, a church and tax-free status, recognition as a sovereign nation, etc. He was suing the government and the continent of Asia, the whole continent, and the United Nations, etc. He also, as proof, said that he sent letters to Britney Spears and she never answered, which proves a big conspiracy against rednecks somehow. All of this was in a 30-page document, completely illegible in his terrible handwriting. Alright, we're starting off strong, huh? That's pretty stupid. I shouldn't be so harsh. It's probably brought on by some sort of mental illness which he can't control, but wow. If I were a judge, I'd be a little exasperated at the very least, having to hear all of this. Like, I can only hope this wasn't a multi-hour sort of session in court, because oh boy, there's some other cases that you probably need to get to more. Next story. When I was 19 years old, I was sued by a 50-something-year-old redneck for $10,000 because I, quote, caused him to lose the will to live. Apparently $10,000 was the magic number to talk him out of taking his own life. Everyone in the US with car insurance has a maximum the driver can be sued for that insurance will cover/represent. My insurance would cover me for up to $10,000. This was advantageous for people looking to make a little money because insurance companies would rather throw the plaintiff some money and settle than waste time and money to go to court. However, if someone were to sue for more than $10,000, I would have to hire my own attorney, and unless the plaintiff had a strong case, he wouldn't be getting anything at all. I accidentally rear-ended a guy going less than 10 miles per hour. My airbags didn't even deploy. He drove an old clunker truck, so my insurance gave him quite a bit of money for his troubles considering no damage was really done. It wasn't enough for him. He then tried to file a medical claim, but that didn't fly. My insurance-sponsored attorney found out he was addicted to painkillers, so he'd been in pain for a while. At that point, this redneck hit the lowest of the low. When I was a teenager, I was served papers stating I was being sued for $10,000 because I caused this man to lose the will to live. Does that sound frivolous to you? It should. Well, on the morning of the deposition, I met the plaintiff's attorney. He was actually a pretty nice guy. He sat right next to me and said, "Hey, sorry about this. I've got to put food on the table, you know?" My insurance ended up settling with the guy for about $3,500. I hope his attorney took half. Next story. I know a paramedic and they told me this story. I was out at a restaurant with some of my friends. There was a guy sitting behind us who went into cardiac arrest. I was still a trainee, so I decided to give him CPR. I kept his heart pumping for 3 minutes before the ambulance arrived. He lived. 3 weeks later, I received a lawsuit complaining I had broken one of the man's ribs. I saved his life, and he was suing me because I did minor damage. Yeah, sorry man, newsflash, CPR, I think you kind of need to break ribs. That's just the cost of doing business. Business being keeping you alive. Next story. I met with this guy who wanted to sue a library because they banned him for a day. Apparently he was being disruptive and the administrator told him he was banned for 1 day. Fortunately, I was able to convince him what a monumentally stupid idea this was. Next story. I'm not sure if this really counts as stupid, but I had a prospective client who wanted to sue for infringement of his patents on PVC piping. He wanted, quote, $20 quadrillion 4 times over. He also had a computer chip implanted in his brain by the FBI. I sent him to the local hospital that specialized in implanted computer chips. Next story. It would be a tie between two. A woman wanted to sue because Dr. Pepper bottle caps had cut her fingers twice over a 3-year period, and a man wanted to sue Walgreens because it had used pictures of his secretary's children in its ad without her permission. Not sure he has standing. Next story. Someone came in because their neighbor had done some gardening along the boundary between their front lawns. The client wanted to know whether she could sue the neighbor for trespass for the pebbles that had come onto the client's side, and theft for the soil that had gone onto the neighbor's side as well. Next story. Conveyancing in England. Legal stuff concerning buying and selling property. Requirement if you have a mortgage, but everyone uses them even when they don't. Had a client selling. Got all the way to exchange when we got told there was a tenant who who we had never been told about. We had to delay the sale on the property because the buyers had no idea either, and we were obligated to tell them. The seller got mad at us and refused to give us any information after, saying that we should just get on with it. We explained we needed the info. She refused. She changed from our company to another and sued us for the delay, and because she had to keep paying the mortgage rather than sell the property. She told the ombudsman that we were refusing to progress the matter, and she was 100% helpful and gave us everything we requested within seconds. We explained our side with evidence of consistent letter writing, etc., and got told it was our fault because we didn't request information about the tenant daily. We did it 2 to 3 times a week, but not daily. She changed within 2 weeks, and because we didn't specifically ask her about the tenant before she instructed us to even act. It was baffling. We ended up paying her fees back plus 300%. She gave us a negative review saying the next company sold the house within 4 days. We looked it up and she still owns the property. People are jerks. Does this person not know that real estate sales are public knowledge? Or at least I think they are. But yeah, you can probably just look up if something's sold or is still owned by someone, right? In which case, who are you trying to fool? What's the point of being like, I sold it without you when you haven't? Make you feel good about yourself? Lying and still having the house you wanted to sell? Yeah, sure, why not? Next story. One time I had a client who was being sued by a business rival. The whole case was pretty bullcrap. His rival walked in and slipped on a fresh puddle of water, like he didn't see it, and hurt himself. Well, the owner was a huge cheapskate, so he immediately flipped out. He almost had a heart attack when I told him I wouldn't charge him anything if we lost. Anyway, that day, believe it or not, I slipped in a puddle of water and hurt my already bad back. I told the young guy who was mopping he would have to fill in for me because he looked like a capable guy. I was more or less joking, but he took it seriously, so I gave him my briefcase. The day of the trial, my client's rival put on a huge sob story and everyone fell for it. The guy defending my client could not open the briefcase. He eventually opened it by flipping the lock. Yeah. Inside, he found my secret weapon, a Krabby Patty. At this point, the client revealed that he was faking and was just trying to get the recipe. At the end of the day, the recipe was kept safe, Mr. Krabs got a wet floor sign, and SpongeBob went back to being a fry cook. That was a good day. I really should have caught on quicker on this one. I think it was funny and well told, so I kept it in, but come on. When it said the owner was a huge cheapskate, I really should have remembered the episode. Although, in my defense, it's been a while since I've seen an episode of SpongeBob, but for some reason, a lot of episodes are just implanted in my memory forever. Next story. I got sued once for hitting a guy in my Ram Charger. It was my fault, but he tried to play me and lost horribly. He got into the ambulance at the scene, then decided against it and said he was fine. The same cop gave us both a ride home. He proceeds to go to a bar, get drunk, and fall off a bar stool and hurt his back. Now he's hurt enough to go to a hospital. He sues but neglects to mention this fact to anyone. My lawyer ripped him apart in court, and I never had to pay a dime other than what insurance paid for his car. Afterwards, my lawyer told me it was the most fun he's ever had on a case. I have another one too. Someone is currently suing a family member because she veered into the left-hand lane, making a right-hand turn, causing this family member to sideswipe them. No idea how that one's gonna turn out, but I can't wait to find out. And I have yet another one too. I almost got scammed 12 years ago. It was the maddest I've ever seen a cop. I rear-ended a lady in a Toyota 4x4 doing about 10. We were pulling off at a stoplight and she hit her brakes. Brake lights were less than the setting sun, and I hit her. The only part of my truck to impact her vehicle was a tow hook about 3 inches long and an inch wide. The entire left side of her back bumper was pushed in, a taillight broken, and minor body damage. I don't have pictures, but it was very clear there was no way my impact could have caused all that. She claimed otherwise, and very loudly to the officer that reported to the scene. He was furious. He tells me I'm free to go, and I waste no time in doing so. As I pulled off, he was giving her the drill instructor treatment. Next story. 2 years ago, I was struck head-on in an intersection by a woman. She was driving an SUV. I was driving my dad's Civic. She was speeding and had gone through a red light. My car was totaled, while hers looked like her bumper needed to be replaced. When the police showed up, they told me she was obviously at fault and not to worry. A few days later, I got a call from my insurance company saying I was at fault. Turns out the lady that hit me was the police chief's wife. It took a year to fight the case in court, which I eventually won due to the huge amounts of evidence against her. But it gets better. 2 months ago, I get a call from my insurance company saying that they were going to close the case. Huge relief. that this chapter of my life was over. The next day, I get a call saying that the case was reopened and I was being sued because the lady had suffered injuries in the crash. A crash that I was ultimately found not at fault for. I don't get it. I don't get why, if you're married to like a police officer or whatever, why that would matter. In all like logical senses, an officer of the law should know best that she was at fault and should, pay the repercussions. Because supposedly that's what he's trying to defend, right? That's what he's trying to uphold. But for some reason, because the police chief, or I guess married to the police chief, a little more than no, but you get special treatment somehow. Last I checked, officers shouldn't be above the law, so why should people associated to them be? I can't even fathom the mental gymnastics on that one, man. Next story. My lawyer husband had a woman come into his office with this gem. She wanted to sue a large grocery chain because her baby's fingers had gotten hurt in one of their carts. How so? Well, all she did was put her baby in the cart, down underneath the cart on that shelf where the babies go. Yeah, baby's fingers were dangling down and the mom ran over its fingers several times. Next story. I got a call at my office from a distraught man. I was at a bar last night. There was a cute lady on the next bar stool. We got to talking and she seemed interested in me. We adjourned to the back of my van for some fun times, and after about 10 minutes, I was horrified to discover she had a dong. Can you sue this person for me? Because now I'm afraid I'll get AIDS and die like a gay person. Sorry, I don't do that kind of work, but good luck. Next story. My dad is a lawyer, and he had one person come in that wanted to sue McDonald's because she got her cheeseburger upside down in the bag at McDonald's instead of right side up. He also had a person come in and he couldn't walk because of some injury at work. At the time, my dad was skeptical, so he hired a psychologist to do an examination on him. She found out that something could be wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Jump to next week, my dad ends up with a video in his hands of the person walking down their driveway to take out the trash. Busted. So my dad called them and told them, hey, come on in. We have a breakthrough in your case and you can get some money for your injury. So the guy comes to his office and he leaves him sitting in the lobby for almost an hour because my dad knows this guy's a scumbag just trying to get money over nothing, which makes lawyers look bad. So then my dad calls him into the meeting room, plays the video, and the guy walked out. Next story. I'm kind of late to all of this and I'm not a lawyer, but here goes. Around 7 or 8 years ago, a woman fell together with her balcony onto my mother's car. This woman was around 55 years old, so she ended up with lots of broken bones and some pretty nasty bruises. Considering my mom's car pretty much saved her freaking life, she would have fallen from a greater height and onto rough concrete had it not been there. She decided it was a good idea to sue us. It's important to note here that A, it was her freaking fault that she fell, as she decided that wasting her money on safety checks was of no use, therefore, no insurance money. B, our car insurance sued her for some of the damage she caused. We paid most of it. Miss Thick as a Brick decides to sue my mother for parking her car there. She claims she would have been better off if it weren't there, which by any logic is complete bullcrap. Well, guess what happened? She lost the case. As a result, she now had to pay both for the damage she caused, a fraction of her medical bill, she had medical insurance, and the lawyer fees for both herself and my mother. This is the point where she exhibits excellent cognitive skills and logic. She decides to move without informing the authorities. My mom notices the moving crew and decides to follow her to her new address. She writes down the address and eventually provides our insurance with it since the woman stopped responding to her mail. All of this got her in more trouble than she already was in. To top it all off, the investigation caused by the latter eventually led to the police finding out that she and her husband were connected to a human trafficking network. TLDR, woman decides to be a greedy idiot and ends up being busted for human trafficking. Next story. Not a lawyer, but in my law class, the teacher told us a bunch of awesome stories, which I shall now share. So mom is doing drugs with her 3-year-old son around. She ends up doing too much and passes out, dropping her lighter on a coffee table. Junior comes around and sees the lighter, picks it up. He wonders if it would glow if he held it under his shirt and lit it. He was horribly burned, disfigured, and has a life of constant pain now. So once his drugged up mom regains consciousness, she decides to sue the lighter company because it was totally their fault for not putting a keep out of reach of children sticker on it. She actually wins an insane amount of money, which I imagine went straight to drugs since she can now afford it because screws spending any to help her son in any way. And now lighters have a keep out of reach of children sticker on them. Next story. Firefighters were called when they heard barking coming from the locked trunk of a vehicle. Although it was 61 degrees, animals were still locked in the trunk of the car, so the firefighters decided to use force to get them out. The owner of the dogs and the vehicle decided to sue them, stating that, "I put them back there because I didn't want them in the cabin because they'll unlock the door. Those pups cost about $1,000 each. I don't want someone to just reach in there and steal them." Okay, so cool logic for inanimate objects. However, puppies, dogs, those are living creatures, and I think have to be dealt with a little differently. Just a thought. If you don't see the difference, probably shouldn't have dogs. Next story. I had a crazy older client who was suing his minister for seducing his younger wife and convincing her to dump him. He came in with the wife he abandoned for the younger wife. The guy was absolutely nuts. Some idiot signed him up and filed the suit, and I inherited it. I spent hours telling the guy he did not have a case and finally had to withdraw against his will. It was a bit sticky because the judge was grumpy. Next story. There are a lot of nuts who want lawyers to help them. I've gotten calls from a guy who thinks there's a conspiracy against him run by the government and the Hispanics. That's not the only conspiracy theorist who is called either. I've also gotten calls from people who probably read too much Reddit. Can I sue the cops because they talked to me for an hour at my house, but it turns out I didn't do anything wrong, so they should have left me alone? Yeah, that's a good case. I totally want to spend my time on getting you the compensation you deserve for having to talk for an hour. Next story. Law student here. One of the best cases studied so far. Catco versus Briney, 1971. An elderly couple owned a boarded-up old house on some property where they didn't actually live, and they grew tired of trespassers coming onto the land. Apparently it happened frequently. Finally, after no trespassing signs failed, Mr. Briney cleaned and oiled a 20-gauge shotgun, rigged it to a bed frame in the house, aimed it at the bedroom door, and ran a wire from the gun's trigger to the doorknob. He figured, problem solved. One day, Catco decides to break into the house and steal some old bottles and other items he considered to be antiques. He comes in by removing some window boards, opens the bedroom door, and boom! The 20-gauge blows his entire right leg clear and away. Catco survived and sued the Brineys. The case went to the Supreme Court of Iowa, and Catco won on the basis that one only gets the privilege to use deadly force if an intruder threatens death or great bodily harm. Since the Brineys were only protecting their property and not their lives, they had no privilege for an awesome drone cannon in their shed. Not so unreasonable, just strange to imagine a criminal who commences an unlawful action gaining a claim against the person being wronged. TLDR, don't use automated turrets to defend your property. You'll probably be liable to the burglars that they maim. Edit. Emphasizing I don't think this ruling was unreasonable. Obviously, undiscriminating drone gun turrets for home protection are bad news. I just thought the case was an example of stupidity/interesting. In fact, in response to this ruling, several states enacted reactionary briny bills geared toward protecting those defending their homes, families, or properties. A Nebraska act passed stating that no person shall be placed in jeopardy for defending by any means those things. Fortunately, that legislation was held to be unconstitutional. Next story. I used to work for the Attorney General in my home jurisdiction. A guy who had his children taken away for some really horrible abuse. He was crazy and had really bat crap religious beliefs. Tried to get his kids back, claiming they were his intellectual property. He sent notices that he'd copyrighted the kids and demands for their return. Then he got the idea that his name and all the kids' names were trademarks, so every time he received a court document that referenced any of their names, he sent us an invoice for trillions of dollars for each use of his trademarks. Next story. When I was working for a New Jersey judge, we did mostly cases with the Division of Youth and Family Services, negligent custody, adoptions, etc. This case technically was the government suing for custody, and it wasn't stupid. The parents never fed, clothed, sent their children to school, or otherwise let them out of the house, in addition to beating them. At any rate, this case was recurring, and involved parents who claimed to belong to the Moorish nation. Their entire legal defense was that they were descended from Moors, and the United States government had no power over them. Not only was the government powerless over Moors, but by taking the children, we were also committing mass worldwide genocide. Additionally, we were committing piracy, assault, and various other religious transgressions. What was most surprising to me was that their brief to the court seemed to have been written by someone with at least some legal training, but it only cited ancient Roman and other old world civil law, multiple treaties between African and European states, a few completely off-point cases from like Wyoming and Ohio traffic court, and a copious amount of religious law that I was never able to find at all. Needless to say, we placed the kids with foster parents despite a riot in the courtroom because the entire church showed up. Luckily, the brief and parents' testimony described in comprehensive, vivid detail how I'm going to burn in the eternal flames of damnation, so I have something to look forward to. Oh my. Now, it's definitely dangerous territory saying that, kids should be taken away from religious parents, but I feel like it has less to do with the fact that they were religious and more to do with the specific beliefs and the effect it was having on the kids, right? Like, not feeding or clothing or beating them completely unrelated to the religious zealousness, but having the whole church show up in court is crazy. Sorry guys, but I don't think court works like that. I don't think there's a voting system from the gallery. Anyway, I hope those kids are doing much, much better now. And, OP, I hope you don't end up burning in eternal flames of damnation. Sounds like you did some good work. Would be crazy if they were right, though. Next story. I worked in a forensic engineering company for a while. I saw a case where a skateboarder was hitching, holding onto the back of a truck without their consent, and hit a bump in the road. Somehow fell down, and the truck ran over him. Terrible injuries, paralyzed from the waist down. Reading the depositions and seeing the pictures was incredibly sad and gruesome. Anyway, long story short, the skateboarder sues the city for a crap ton of money and wins? I don't remember the specifics, but it was heavy into the 7 figures. Next story. I'm not a lawyer, but my evil uncle once sued his wife's friend because, while him, his wife, and son were at her house, they failed to watch their kid, and he fell in the pool and nearly drowned. The lady pulled him out, gave him CPR, and saved his life. My jerk uncle sued her after that. He also tried suing my relatives and my parents for not giving him money. He sells bar soap, too. He's very weird. Next story. My practice does a lot of personal injury work, so I get ridiculous calls every day. Everyone thinks they have $1 million case, and many people call us before they even seek medical attention. The truth is, most injuries aren't worth pursuing unless they're fairly, not extremely, serious. People don't give plaintiffs' attorneys enough credit. We act as an important shield to keeping ridiculous cases out of the courts. Despite what you may hear the news blowing out of proportion, we easily turn down 90% of cases. Why people hate us is mystifying. We sue insurance companies. Everyone hates insurance companies. It is ungodly rare to sue someone without insurance coverage or to seek damages beyond insurance policy limits. Insurance policies even provide free legal defense to defendants. That's getting off pretty easy after negligently hurting someone else that just wants their medical bills and lost work paid for. Ah well, it's not like I didn't know about the hate for lawyers before becoming a lawyer. Next story. I work for an insurance company where we insure cases going to court, and I read hundreds of personal injury claims every week. Most of them are basic tripping over cases, suing the council, etc. But every now and then, you get some funny ones. And some horrific ones. One guy sued a huge supermarket chain because he burned himself on a microwavable meal. He got like $2,000 because he's too stupid to operate plastic film. Another lady sued a nightclub for falling over whilst wearing 4-inch heels and after having consumed more than 4 times the recommended amount of alcohol. She still managed to get paid out a few hundred. In the same day, I read the file of the latter. A case came through where a young girl was paralyzed from the waist down after standing on a bar stool at work to reach for something from a shelf. One of the stool legs snapped and caused it to become as sharp as a knife, and as she fell, she landed on it, and it entered directly into her anus. She didn't get a penny in the end because, after all, she shouldn't have been standing on the stool in the first place. Okay, so the first 2 getting payouts is a bit upsetting. The last one getting a payout, I guess, is also wrong, but if any of the 3 got one, I would have hoped she would. That hurt me physically to read. I'm so sorry. Next story. This isn't quite a response to the question posed, but it's still a stupid or funny case. This is all hearsay, so take it for what it's worth. Friend of mine had a boss who claimed this story from his days as a public defender. Defendant is allegedly jerking it at a urinal in the bathroom. Plainclothes undercover cop catches him. They were the only ones there. Goes to a jury trial for public indecency or something like that. Basically, the PD's entire defense is the urinal buffer rule, as in, if space is available, a man will never willingly choose a urinal directly adjacent to one already in use. He'll have a 1 urinal buffer. Guy gets acquitted. TLDR, man law is binding legal precedent. Next story. When I was about 13 or 14, I was really into skating and used to have to get the bus to the nearest town to go to their skate park. Well, I wasn't too fond of this because A, it was an hour each way, and B, it was a crappy town, and some of the more, unsavory types used to come down sometimes and start on us. So we decided what we needed was a skate park in our own town. So my friends and I eventually got together and started a charity with the help of a few local adults and eventually the council. After a couple of years, we'd raised about £60,000 and our skate park was built. Despite nearly being 30, this still sits as one of my proudest achievements. I was in charge of finances despite my age, and hey, I was pretty damn good at it. There were a few requirements to suit the insurers and ROSPA, Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, such as gating it off and having a lot of signs that have warnings, and to ban anyone from under 10 from using the park. Despite these signs, the inevitable happened, and a kid aged 8 went onto it, with his parents' blessing and presence, and walked right in front of another skater and was knocked over with a broken wrist. So the parents sued. Oh dear. Never mind, we pointed out that So the parents sued. Oh dear. Never mind, we pointed out that the signs clearly stated an age limit, and the parents should have known better than to let him run around in a skate park when he was 2 years under the age limit. However, you'll never guess what their solicitor's argument was. Apparently, us putting up the signs with the warning showed we knew there was a problem and we didn't do anything about it. Screw those parents for blaming everyone else for their failed parenting, and screw their solicitor for trying to destroy a much-loved skate park for a quick quid. Next story. Here's one from the British Columbia Supreme Court. The guy alleged that he had been the unwilling subject of, quote, invasive brain-computer interface technology perpetrated by Microsoft, Walmart, Google, TELUS, the University of British Columbia, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, CyberLogic, Great Canadian Gaming, the Provincial Sheriff's Department, and the College of Physicians of British Columbia. For this grave tort, he requested $2 billion Canadian dollars or American dollars, as well as a red 2007 Ferrari, black 2009 Lamborghini, 2 2008 V-Red Harley-Davidson motorcycles, 2 2008 Honda 250cc dirt bikes, 2009 black Dodge pickup truck. He actually managed to get the proper filings in, so a few of the defendants had to go to the trouble of getting his pleading struck down. It would have cost them some money, which they probably could have recovered from the guy, but I would assume they decided it would be best to just leave crazy alone. Next story. I have people ask me questions about possible bad cases every day. Some are okay, some are ridiculous, and some are valuable. On the plaintiff's side, where I would typically be working on a cut, my job is to be the gatekeeper. If a potential case is ridiculous, why would I or any other lawyer want to spend my own money on it? As attorneys on contingency cases, we front all expenses, and if we don't recover for the client, we just walk it off. That's not working for free. That's paying to work. And that's the way a lot of the cases that people complain about work. The insurance industry has done a great job of convincing the world that lawyers are out here throwing our own money into frivolous cases. People buy it, then they pass tort reform based on an urgent need to curb the flood of frivolous lawsuits that don't exist. All you have to do in this country is declare McDonald's coffee, and every ignorant moron in the room can nod in agreement at how out of control the system is. Even that case, by the way, was far from frivolous if you take the time to actually understand the case instead of a 2-sentence description out of Jay Leno's mouth. Rant over. I had a lady ask me if I'd help her sue her neighbor. The lady was concerned because her neighbor, an elderly gentleman, added a door to the side of his house, and she was convinced that he did that so he would have a line of sight to her bedroom. She was incensed, and she was willing to pay me out of pocket to prosecute this ridiculous lawsuit. She insisted over and over again that it was about the principle and money is no object. So I did what we always do when a crazy person is standing in our office screaming, "Take my money!" I quoted her a retainer of $35,000 and told her I'd get right on it as soon as the funds cleared. She asked why I needed such a large retainer, to which I reply, you don't have a real basis for a lawsuit. If I'm going to look like an idiot helping you, I am absolutely going to be paid well for it. She went away. That's how we do it. Honestly, OP's probably right. That's probably so true that there's not anywhere near the amount of frivolous lawsuits that we think there are. I guess the McDonald's coffee thing is probably one of the better known examples, but also, people just don't look into things at all, do they? It's crazy, man. Even a cursory glance into the coffee lawsuit would show you she had a real case. And then OP goes on to tell us an actual frivolous case, so fair enough. But as OP showed, these things usually aren't taken on if they're truly just pointless. Next story. Well, I guess I can share my story, even though I was the one who was sued. About 5 years ago, me and my girlfriend adopted a dog from the local pound. 1 year later, she took a position in DC, and we had to decide what we were going to do with said dog. Because she was going to be moving into an apartment, we agreed that I would keep the dog at my house in Colorado, and she would be able to take him for a few days when she was in town visiting family, once or twice a year for a couple days at a time. Fast forward 3 years, and by now I have another girlfriend living with me. The ex and I broke up when she moved to DC. The ex comes to pick up the dog during one of her visits, sees my new girlfriend, and kinda loses her cool. After that, she started demanding that I meet her in a neutral location to give her the dog when she came to visit, and then she demanded I give her the dog for a few months out of the year. Naturally, I thought she was being ridiculous. Next thing I know, I'm being sued for custody of the dog. 2 months and many conversations with her lawyer later, I ended up paying her $500 to buy her own dog and get out of my life. TLDR, I ended up in a doggy custody battle. I do not remember this Air Bud spin-off. Next story. Not a defense attorney, but I work in a prosecutor's office. That job can often be just as ridiculous because you get people showing up on a daily basis wanting other people thrown in jail for random crap. At least once a week, someone comes in wanting to file a restraining order on someone else for posting lies about them on Facebook. A few days ago, I spent an hour being screamed at by an elderly person because I told him a neighbor's tree branch hanging over the property line didn't qualify as criminal trespassing. In general, people simply do not understand the concept of due process. They will come in guns ablazing expecting us to arrest and charge someone right now based solely upon their personal testimony, despite having no physical evidence, no other witnesses to corroborate their story, and often no address where investigators could even find the accused to follow up on the report. 100% of them leave convinced that the system is biased against them. Next story. Old lady came into the office with 2 wills in her hands, one from 79 and one from 94. She said her daughter had used her inheritance from the 94 will and sold it, but that for one reason or another, she, the daughter, was now broke. Her question, can we use the will from 79 to claim all her inheritance back? You do not need to be a lawyer to answer this one. Next story. Texas state judge here. Homeowner invited people to his house for Sunday morning after Saturday night wedding. Sunday morning, he's passed out in bed. Guests arrive and let themselves in. Lady with 2-year-old kid sees there isn't food, so she makes some lunch. Meanwhile, her 2-year-old drowns in the pool. She sues homeowner because if he had lunch ready, she would have been watching her kid rather than making lunch. Jury gave her 0. Next story. Here's a funny anecdote from one of my old case files. Phone rings. Law offices. Do you help people get restraining orders in domestic violence cases? 4 or 5 every month. Do you represent gays or just straights? I represent anyone who needs me and can afford to pay me. Do you make house calls? Sometimes, if they can't make it in. Tell me about your situation. Well, my partner attacked me last night, and he undoubtedly would have seriously injured me if my pet wolf hadn't intervened. And, hold on a second. There's a goddamn wolf over there? He's actually a very nice wolf. It's only ignorant people who are afraid of him. I don't do house calls to houses where there are wolves. You're gonna have to come to my office. Next story. Not a lawyer, but I know a couple of stories anyway. My dad manages a Rite Aid, and a woman sued his store because she tripped over the giant yellow thing that stops cars from plowing into the front of the store. It never went to court because the company decided to give her some $10,000. She was super old, but still, it's painted bright yellow. The other one hits a bit closer to home. I had a rescue dog for many years who was so lovable, but had some issues around people she wasn't familiar with. Well, my sister had her friend over and they and the dog were in her bedroom. She went to the bedroom and closed her bedroom door. Something happened and the dog nipped her friend in the face and she had to get 3 stitches. It wasn't all that bad, but I now know you can't screw around in cases like that. We put down the dog and offered to pay all the hospital bills. The girl's family refused and took us to court. Over a 10-year legal battle, the case was settled. I was never told the full amount, but my father had to refinance our family house to cover it. The girl had no scar after 3 months. People are truly screwed up. Next story. Not me, but my childhood best friend. She did law school in England and practices there now. Her first day volunteering at the legal aid clinic at her school, a bedraggled guy with long hair and a beard halfway down his chest came in. Said he'd just returned from 10 years in a Thai prison for drugs, and he wanted her to help him sue the Queen for not rescuing him. Awesome. Next story. Swedish lawyer here. Former client wanted to sue an employer for not providing him with a letter of recommendation. Demanded compensation for the accumulated lost wages from all the jobs the client didn't get, which he certainly would have with said letter of recommendation, for the 6 years following the termination of the employment in question. Hats off to him for thinking outside of the box. The box of sanity, that is. Next story. Someone I know dealt with a case where a 400-pound woman sat on a swing in the kindergarten play area at a school and broke it. Then sued the district for damages and won. The school responded by removing all potentially dangerous playground equipment and installed a plaque blaming the woman, using her full name, for the removal. She sued again for defamation, but lost and had to pay the district's legal fees. Next story. Well, we had some squatters that were living in a house we owned on the property. Some backstory. An old man used to live in the house, but died of cancer. Now, his family not once ever came to visit him. We took care of him, got him groceries and whatnot. His inbred family decides that the house is theirs. It is not. The house and everything is in my father's name. So here they come from like Ohio all the way to Tennessee to try to move in. Well, they succeeded, because when we called the cops, they claimed they couldn't do anything about it. BS. So anyway, we get our attorney involved and try to evict them. After a couple of tries, they eventually move out, but take the fridge and some appliances with them, but leave their father's ashes. Scumbags. We're like, whatever, they left. We go check the house out and they've set up a makeshift bomb. They have an oxygen tank set up on the porch with a metal rod pointing to the sky. What the hell? So we get a letter in the mail a few weeks later from some attorney in California who is saying that the squatters actually own the house and that we need to move out. They're claiming that they own the old man's house and our house. The letter was not from an attorney. The attorney's office they used doesn't exist. They made it up. So anyway, our attorney is having a field day with this whole thing and mailed them a legitimate letter back basically saying, stop, or you're going to be in a big legal mess. So that was about 3 years ago and we haven't heard from them since. We think they moved to a polygamy community. Next story. My ex's mom was a lawyer. One of her clients at the time had a great one. She was riding on the back of her boyfriend's motorcycle when a pheasant came flying at them. The boyfriend ducked, which meant that the pheasant hit her right in the face and knocked her off the back of the bike. They broke up about 6 months later, and it was at this point the woman decided she wanted to sue him for ducking. Pretty freaking ridiculous. You mean sue him for pheasanting? Okay, I'll admit it. Not my best work. Moving on. Next story. I'm not a lawyer, but I was sued for $50,000 in college because of something that happened during a Snowball fight. I'd returned from winter break early to do some prep work for an upcoming debate tournament. I walked from the debate union to the girls' dorm for some of my partner's files. When I came back, all of my teammates were having a snowball fight. This one girl, weighing 250 pounds per the ER record, decides to run towards me with some snow. I instinctively grabbed one of her hands and pulled her down, causing her to flip over my arm and land hard on her shoulder. 2 years later, I'm served with papers for a $50,000 lawsuit. Girl is suing for the cost of the surgery to fix her shoulder. The rub, however, lies in that they can't do an MRI because she has a fear of enclosed spaces. Also, they can't sedate her because she has a fear of needles. So she wants the money for surgery without the actual surgery. Long story short, we settled for $12,000. Some people. Next story. So about 6 months ago, an uncle of mine living out in East Texas had died from a drug overdose. He had a lot of land and he lived with my grandma. After he died, part of the family, cousins, thought it was their right to go into my grandma's land and take whatever they wanted. Now, my grandma was suffering from dementia, so she couldn't stop them, and these cousins had no right to any of the things because my grandma still owned the property, and my dad made sure the freeloading cousins knew this. A note on the cousins, they'd been living off family for years. They'd been asking us for money constantly for years, and being the nice people my parents are, they give them a little money. Well, back to the story. The cousins then decide to sue my parents for the rights to the land and the things my grandma still has. Fortunately, it never went to court because my dad told them to please sue us. No lawyer would take the case. They eventually gave up. They don't get money from us anymore. Personally, I don't consider them family anymore. Next story. I'm not a lawyer, but I do have a good story of a potentially stupid case. When I was young, this was about 10 years ago now, my brother had a friend named Peter. They were pretty much inseparable, and the kid was actually not annoying, so I liked him as well. One day he was over at our house, and my mom had to feed us all. She hadn't gone shopping in a week, so all she had were chicken nuggets, and about 15 of them to boot, so that was about 5 for all of us. With us still hungry, she decided to offer us mitai. Which is a generic term for a large family of Indian sweets. Now, if you've never had mitai, there are a lot of different types of it, but in essence, it's fried sugar and milk. The milk is important because there's usually a crap load of milk/dairy in it, so you can get sick if you eat a lot of it and aren't accustomed to it. Think of doing the gallon challenge, except you're eating instead of drinking. Anyway, one of the mitai my mom had was called burfi, except there's often a layer of edible silver foil on there. So, my mom gives my brother and Peter about 3 pieces each of it, and they finished the rest of their playdate in peace, and Peter's mom came to pick him up a few hours later. That night, my mom gets an angry phone call from Peter's mom. Apparently, Peter is sick and throwing up everywhere, and she blames us for it. I was young and my mom didn't have the phone on speaker, but I could still hear this lady yelling the most terrible things at my mother, calling her a freaking monster and, "What the hell did you do to my baby? I'm going to sue the crap out of you," etc. So my mom just silently listened to this tirade, not saying a word. Finally, mid-tirade, Peter's mom said, "I can't believe you fed him cat food, you monster!" And my mom just silently remarked, "How do you know what cat food tastes like?" Peter's mom stopped yelling, and she and her mother continued a conversation in hushed tones for the next minute before my mom put the phone down and started laughing. She told me that Peter's mom had quietly told her that she didn't think the kids should see each other anymore. My mom agreed. I was a bit taken aback because I thought my brother would be too young to handle that kind of rejection. My mom looked at me and just said, "The woman feeds cat food to her son. We don't need that crazy in our life." We saw Peter and his mom about a year later at a mutual friend's birthday party. I meowed at her whenever I got the chance, and all she could do was flare her face up and look away. To this day, though, my mom refuses to feed Indian food to anyone who's not used to it, i.e., white people. TLDR, did we feed your kid cat food? No. Do you? There's a strong case for it. Next story. Not me, but there was this one case where after 9/11, a Pakistani man was held against his habeas corpus rights in a federal max security prison because he was on a terror watch list. Turns out he was completely innocent, but that didn't stop officials from torturing and abusing him. He went to a lawyer to file the case, and in it, he sued the FBI and federal government, Ashcroft, for holding him against his habeas corpus rights, discriminating against him, and torturing him. Seems as though it was a legit claim, since it even got all the way to the Supreme Court. But instead of addressing the issue or his evidence, they decided to rule that now all pleadings, what plaintiffs file against defendants alleging their claims made in federal courts, must attach some facts to them. His didn't, thus his case was thrown out on a technicality. Iqbal versus Ashcroft. Next story. This is kind of the reverse. I'm a lawyer in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I've been threatened with a lawsuit twice and contempt once because I refused to accept orders from 3 different judges attempting to force people to sell their interest in Katrina-damaged properties. Typical scenario. Mom and dad owned a house damaged in the storm. Mom dies after the storm and 4 children inherit her interest in the house. One child doesn't get along with the rest and refuses to participate in the sale. The family members go to the succession judge and the judge issues an order commanding the uncooperative child to sign the sale documents. It's really uncomfortable explaining to a sitting judge that they can't just force people to sell their property because of the Constitution. Next story. I'm not a lawyer, but my grandpa owns a firm and my father is one. One day, an elderly black woman wearing a hole-ridden sundress with bedhead and bedroom slippers walks in. She's using a reusable shopping bag as a purse and she just looks homeless. She tells my father that her son was running a drug lab and got busted. My dad took her to one of our lawyers that dealt with those cases. She asked how much it would be to have her son represented. The lawyer said $30,000. They suspected her to walk out defeatedly and return to her box home under the highway, but instead, without hesitating, the woman pulls a brown paper bag out of her purse, lays $30,000 on the table, and says, "I brought 50 just in case." We represented her and the rest is history. I'm not sure, but I believe we won the case. Next story. This moron tried to sue a major coffee chain in New York a few years back. He came to me because of a burn he got while spilling his coffee on himself in a movie theater. The company was actually willing to settle though because they did not want the bad press. This idiot goes and treats the burn he got and it heals overnight. So we walk into the settlement meeting with no proof he was ever even burned. The first offer we get isn't even half on the table when my client cuts off the speaker and accepts. At least he got a lifetime of free coffee from it, but it remains one of the stupidest cases I ever took. Next story. I have a fresh one, actually. Last year we had to intervene because my sister was helping my mother by siphoning her rental income, trying to have her committed for her depression, and running up $4,000 on her credit cards, claiming it was a mistake because she paid her mom's account and the bank erroneously started putting her bills on mom's card. Nice, huh? It gets better. Mom had had a stroke. Thus, my sister was helping with her rentals, etc. Mom came out of the nursing home aged 70 using a walker. My sister, one night while yelling at her for shutting her out of financial control, claimed my mother repeatedly slammed her into the doorframe and drove her head into the storm door window. She actually went to the hospital arm in a sling, and that 46-year-old woman said her 72-year-old mother who needed a walker for support threw her repeatedly into the doorframe. She also claimed she was 169 pounds. She was mistaking the weight of her left ankle for her body weight. Anyway, I took Mom into Adult Protective Services and we filed for protection order. Since Mom was never hit, just stolen from repeatedly and harassed by this ridiculous report, it was dismissed without prejudice, meaning we could refile if my sister escalated to physical violence. Friday, my mother received a notice that my sister is suing her for $300,000 for assault and various other charges that, in essence, speak to a conspiracy to embarrass her. My sister has had 2 house repossessions and 2 rental evictions in the last 15 years, despite her husband being in the Army Reserves and having white-collar computer programming jobs. She has bounced checks to nearly everyone in the family and has, quote, forgotten the gifts in the other car at nearly every holiday for years. Now she seeks to sue my mother. She will not win, obviously, but my mother doesn't have the extra resources to throw into legal black holes. Is this audacity or what? This isn't just a stupid case. This is an evil case. Your sister, for some reason, just hates the rest of you. I don't know if it's selfishness or what, but OP, I hope you get this dealt with and she doesn't see a dime. Absolutely absurd. Anyway, that's the last story for today. Have you guys ever been in any lawsuits? I personally haven't, but maybe I just have a boring life. Let me know in the comments. For now, though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.